In the summer of 1933, on a farm with no electricity and no refrigerator of any kind, a family put away enough food to carry 6 people through an entire winter, and almost none of it spoiled before spring. They did it with glass jars, a hole in the ground, a little salt, and knowledge that most of us have completely lost. By the time this is over, you will understand how they kept food safe through the seasons without a single watt of power. Number 7 on this list is the room under the house that worked as a refrigerator all year without electricity. Number 4 is the method that could keep eggs fresh for half a year. And number 2 is the one that, done wrong, could quietly take a life, which is part of why it was treated with such care. These were the years when there was no money to waste a scrap of food and no machine to keep it from going bad. This is how they made it last. They didn't have much, but they knew how to make it last. Number 7. The root cellar. Dug into the earth below the frost line or built into the side of a hill, the root cellar held the steady cool of the deep ground all year round, a few degrees above freezing in the dead of winter and far cooler than the summer air outside. Down its wooden steps went the harvest. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, beets, cabbages, and apples were laid in bins and on shelves, packed in sand or straw to hold them apart, and a careful family could walk down into that cool, dark room in the middle of February and bring up vegetables put away in October, still firm and good. It was a refrigerator made of nothing but earth, and it never needed power or paying for. Number 6. Canning the whole summer into jars. Through the warm months, the kitchen became a small factory. Whatever the garden gave in its season was cooked and sealed, boiling hot into glass jars, the lids drawn down tight as the jars cooled, so the food inside was closed away from the air that would spoil it. Tomatoes, green beans, corn, peaches, berries, and pickles all went into the jars by the dozen, and the shelves of a depression cellar in autumn held row upon row of glass, a whole summer's garden saved against the winter. A woman might spend weeks of hot August days over a steaming kettle, putting away hundreds of jars, because those jars were the difference between eating and going without when the cold came. Number 5. Salt, smoke, and the keeping of meat. Meat was rare and precious, and when a family did have it in any quantity, the work began at once to keep it from spoiling, because there was no other way to hold it. Pork was rubbed thick with salt and packed away in crocks, or hung in a small smokehouse over a slow smoldering fire for days until the smoke and the salt together had dried and preserved it through to the bone. Hams and sides of bacon cured this way hung in the smokehouse and were cut from all winter long. It was old knowledge, older than the Depression by centuries, and in those years it came back into every household that was lucky enough to have meat to save. Here is what made all of this matter so much. In the early 1930s, with a quarter of the country out of work, food was not something a family could afford to lose. A garden that failed or a cellar that spoiled was not an inconvenience. It was hunger coming in the winter. There were no food stamps as we know them, and the relief that existed was thin and uncertain. So the work of growing food in summer and keeping it safe into spring was not a pleasant country hobby. It was the most serious work a family did all year, because the family that put away enough good food ate, and the family that did not, or whose stores went bad, faced the lean months with empty shelves and nowhere to turn. Now answer this before you hear the rest. If the power went out for good tomorrow and stayed out, could you keep a single week's food from spoiling, let alone a winter's worth, with no refrigerator and no freezer at all? Write yes or no in the comments right now, before you hear the rest of the list. Then keep watching, because every method that follows still works today, exactly as it did then. Number 4. Eggs that kept for months. Hens lay well in the warm months and poorly in the cold, so the trick was to save the spring and summer eggs to eat in winter. Fresh eggs were lowered into a crock filled with a solution that sealed their shells against the air and stored in the cool of the cellar, and eggs put down this way in June could still be good in December. Other families simply coated each egg in grease or lard to close the shell and pack them away small end down. It seems like magic to us now, pulling a fresh egg in midwinter from a crock filled the summer before. But it was ordinary knowledge then, one more way a family stretched the abundance of summer across the hunger of winter. Number 3. The icebox and the iceman. In the towns where there was no cellar, the cold came on a wagon. The iceman drove his route, delivering great blocks of ice cut from frozen lakes the winter before and stored in sawdust, and a card in the window told him how large a block the household wanted that day. The block went into the top of an insulated wooden cabinet, the icebox, and the cold sank down over the food below, and a pan underneath caught the slow drip as it melted. It had to be refilled every few days as the ice ran down to nothing. It was not as cold as a modern refrigerator, and it did not keep food nearly as long. But for a city family, it was the only cold they had, and it was bought one melting block at a time. Let me tell you about one of those autumns. On a farm in Iowa in 1934, a mother spent the whole of the harvest filling her cellar against the winter, and she knew to the jar what was down there. So many quarts of tomatoes, so many of beans, so many crocks of salted pork, so many bushels of potatoes in the sand. Through the winter, she went down those steps and brought up exactly what the family needed and no more, rationing the shelves so they would reach the spring. It was not a casual thing. The full cellar in October was the family's whole security against the cold months, and the slow, careful emptying of it through the winter was the quiet arithmetic of survival, counted out jar by a woman who could not afford to count wrong. Number 2. Knowing the danger and respecting it. There is a shadow over this story that the warm pictures of full pantry shelves leave out. Food kept the old ways could fail, and when it failed, it could be deadly. Meat that did not take the cure could spoil unseen. A jar of vegetables sealed without enough heat could grow a poison inside it that the eye could not detect and that could take a life. And families did fall ill, and some died, from food that had gone wrong in the keeping. The people of the Depression were not careless about this. They were careful precisely because they understood the cost of a mistake, and the great care they took with salt and heat and clean jars was the care of people who knew exactly what was at stake. The knowledge kept them fed. The same knowledge done wrong could hurt them, and they never forgot it. Number 1. Putting the seasons by. Underneath every method on this list was a single way of living that the year itself taught. You took what each season gave in its abundance, and you kept it for the season that gave nothing. The summer garden fed the winter table. The autumn slaughter fed the spring. Nothing was eaten thoughtlessly in plenty, because plenty was the time to put away for want. A Depression family lived by the turning of the year in a way almost no one does now, always working in the present to feed a future they could see coming. That long view, that habit of always keeping something back against the lean times ahead, was the deepest survival skill of all, and it is the one a world of refrigerators has let us forget. So could you do it? Look back at what you answered at the start. A cellar dug into the cool earth and a summer sealed into glass jars, meat held with salt and smoke, eggs kept fresh for half a year, a block of ice on a city wagon, and underneath it all, the careful, serious knowledge that this was how a family ate through the winter, and that a mistake could cost more than a meal. None of it was quaint, and the people who lived it never called the work of it simple or sweet. It was the hard, skilled labor of feeding a family through the seasons with no machine to help. They were the hard years. They didn't have much, but they knew how to make it last, and that's worth remembering. If your parents or grandparents kept a root cellar or canned their own food, tell me in the comments what they put away every year. I want to know which of these your family still remembers. Subscribe and turn on notifications because every week we go back inside the hardest years America ever faced and the forgotten skills the people who survived them knew.